This time on Defense News Weekly, we'll see possible short-range air defense solutions, get a preview of the Dubai Air Show, and examine the history of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. With in-depth interviews, up-close video, and leading analysis, this is Defense News Weekly. Thanks for joining us. I'm Jeff Martin, and welcome to the show. President Trump visited Japan and South Korea this week. While in Japan, the president met with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. The two leaders discussed Japan's trade deficit with the United States and some possible future arms deals. President Trump wants Japan to protect itself from Korea by buying more missile defense hardware from the United States. Trump then headed to South Korea, where bad weather prevented him from visiting the DMZ. He addressed the South Korean General Assembly, warning North Korea to halt its nuclear program.
The world cannot tolerate the menace of a rogue regime that threatens with nuclear devastation. All responsible nations must join forces to isolate the brutal regime of North Korea, to deny it, and any form of it, you cannot support, you cannot supply, you cannot accept.
President Trump then traveled to China, where he met with Chinese Premier Xi Jinping. It's his first trip to Asia as president. The proposed 2018 defense budget just got even bigger. The White House has sent Congress a $6 billion supplemental request, mainly focused on missile defense. Some highlights include 50 new THAAD interceptors built by Lockheed Martin, 16 of the newest Standard Missile-3 interceptors built by Raytheon, and funding to buy 20 new ground-based interceptors, and the funding for an additional field in Alaska of those missiles. While there's no guarantee any of this will actually be bought, it does mark a huge increase in missile defense activities. Ahead of the Dubai Air Show, Defense News is reporting that the United Arab Emirates could be taking the first steps to get the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter. While nothing has been confirmed by U.S. officials, sources say the Trump administration is considering allowing a classified briefing on the F-35's capabilities, something that is normally the first step toward acquiring the aircraft. If the UAE did acquire the plane, it would be the first Gulf country to do so. Army leaders say their biggest gap is short-range air defense, and we're learning new details on just what the Army is looking for when it comes to filling that need.
We're in search of a shoot-on-the-move capability that it keeps rolling with the maneuver force or keeps moving with the maneuver force and not having to stop in place for a 15-minute time period, that it has the capability to shoot on the move and protect that maneuver force as it's moving forward.
Colonel Chuck Worsham runs the Army's Project Office for Short-Range Air Defense. This summer, his office hosted several companies at White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico so they could show the Army what they could do.
The way the MSHORAD acquisition will take place is we will look for an interim capability to be fielded in the 21 timeframe, and then we'll be looking for more of a long-range objective capability to be fielded in the 26 timeframe.
Multiple companies responded, ranging from a Boeing General Dynamics team to South Korean company Hanwha. The Boeing General Dynamics team featured a Boeing turret armed with longbow missiles atop a General Dynamics Stryker, while Hanwha brought their Flying Tiger air defense system. The Stryker was also used by Orbital ATK to show off their gun-based tactical robot exterminator. And finally, Rafael demonstrated the proven Iron Dome system, which is already deployed by Israel. Worsham says having two of the exhibitors come from companies outside the United States is actually a benefit for the Army.
Quite frankly, they have some capabilities that we've not seen demonstrated before in some of the U.S.-made systems. And so what we're hoping to learn from them is also, again, to inform what the requirement should look like for our objective MSHORAD requirement as we move forward.
While the White Sands demonstration wasn't the only one the Army has done, it's a big part of the Army's search for a short-range air defense solution. For more on that search, visit DefenseNews.com. The Dubai Air Show is one of the biggest defense events in the world, and it's right around the corner. I sat down this week with air warfare reporter Valerie Insena to discuss what we expect to see when we get there. All right, Valerie, thanks for joining us and sitting down today. So first of all, what are you looking forward to seeing? What do you think we might see at Dubai Air Show this week?
So the thing that I'm looking forward to the most is the chance to see what the U.S.'s top competitors are doing. Russia is going to be there, China is going to be there, and they're very competitive in the Middle Eastern market. So this is a chance for them to roll out what they have. Apparently Rostec, a very large Russian company, has an announcement that they're going to make, and in the past they had talked about an agreement with the UAE to develop a 5th-generation fighter, so maybe we'll see something in that area. This is also, you know, the second big air show that the Trump administration has appeared in. Mm-hmm. So Ellen Lord, who is the Pentagon's head of acquisition, she's going to be there, is going to be speaking. So we'll see if, you know, she has anything interesting to say as well.
So it's a big kind of it's the the Paris Air Show is very much the Trump administration meets the international aviation community. Now it's the Trump administration heads to the Middle East.
Right, and there are a lot more people in place now. So this is sort of, you know, maybe the first big test of, you know, getting them on the ground and having them interact with their counterparts in the Middle East.
And that's a big deal. So some of the aircraft we're going to see, there's lots. There's a pretty good sized display. We have Chinese J-10s, Russians. What's the one that's got you most excited of all the aircraft on display?
Well, Japan is bringing their C-2. It's a transport aircraft. That's one of the new ones that are heading over there. The F-35 is not going to make an appearance, but I expect there will be lots of talk about that, especially as UAE sort of pushes forward with their desire to eventually get that.
Defense News just published an article last week on this. Walk me through kind of a little bit of that article and what that means for the region.
Okay, so my colleague Barbara Opal-Rome broke this incredible story about how the UAE is pushing for classified briefings about the F-35, and that the Trump administration seems, you know, like that this might happen, that this might be okay, and even more importantly, that Israel might not necessarily raise alarm bells. So that could signify, you know, the UAE potentially getting this aircraft in the early 2020s and becoming the first Gulf country to do so.
That's a big deal.
Yeah, it is.
And another thing we're seeing is OAX. The U.S. Air Force's OAX program, the competitors in that, look to be making some appearances at Dubai. What can you tell us about that?
Right. So the Air Force, you know, they're still considering whether or not to buy a light attack aircraft. And they haven't made any decision about that. But a lot of these aircraft that, you know, did a flight demo this past summer at Holloman Air Force Base, they're going to be going out to the Middle East and sort of showing off their stuff. So the Textron Scorpion is going to be out there. Textron has actually been out with the Scorpion over the past couple of weeks to Saudi Arabia doing flight demonstrations. So it looks like there's a lot of interest from Saudi Arabia for Scorpion, but it has some other competitors that are going to be at the show too, like the Air Tractor's AT-802 mm-hmm. and the IOMAX Archangel, which is another
quite the name for an aircraft.
Yeah, I mean it's another, you know, modified crop duster. This kind of similar to what Air Tractor is put out with L3. So it'll be interesting to see whether any countries, you know, maybe develop a stronger interest after the show.
So Dubai and Paris and there's a lot of commercial interest, but the defense side is almost an extra addition to these shows. Is that kind of what you see, especially with the lineup for Dubai that we're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really seem like there's any huge, like, oh my God, this is this brand new defense thing, or we're expecting a ton of sales or announcements on the defense side. But, you know, there can always be surprises too.
And that's kind of a big thing that we see with a lot of it. And kind of as we wrap up and we hit the final question we have, what are you hoping to learn? Is there one thing you're hoping to learn and kind of get out of the show, kind of squeeze out of the people that'll be there?
I guess I would just, you know, trying to get a better sense of what the market is over there. There have been a lot of deals for fighter aircraft over the past, you know, 12 months, a year, to places like Bahrain or Kuwait. So I think, you know, what's sort of next? What are they looking for now? You know, that's sort of what I would like to get a handle on.
All right, well, we look forward to reading your coverage, and because Valerie and I will both be in Dubai for this week for the show. It looks to be a great time, lots of stuff, and also very hot. So thanks for sitting down with us, Valerie. We appreciate it. To keep up to date with all of our coverage, be sure to visit our Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn pages. And when we come back, we'll look at the history of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial and hear from one of America's longest-serving prisoners of war. Here at Defense News Weekly, we believe that one day is not enough when it comes to honoring America's veterans. So we're partnering with Military Times to showcase veterans all month long. Here in the Washington area, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial is one of the most visited places and is a place of deep meaning for millions of people. This year marks 35 years since it opened, but it almost didn't get built. To understand why, we sat down with a man behind the wall, Jan Scruggs, and former Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel.
We had no World War II memorial, no Korean War memorial, no World War I memorial. How that was able to come together and have the first memorial built in Washington, recognizing the most unpopular war.
The Vietnam Veterans Memorial was dedicated in 1982, but getting the wall built took some work.
The argument was every other monument in Washington is white, but this one is black.
Vietnam veteran Jan Scruggs began a fundraising effort that soon became a national movement.
This was my duty to the country, was to get this built for our nation, our nation's veterans, and this was something that just I sort of had to do. It was kind of like my mission.
Despite much opposition, including from members of Congress, the wall was built, something Secretary Hagel credits to Scruggs. He says the wall has a profound effect on visitors, including him.
There's a very stunned silence because it just brings you in, and the way it's built, it just envelops you and wraps you into this very sacred, somber ground. And you just don't speak for a while. You just absorb it and soak it in.
And in Hagel's mind, perhaps the most important thing is that the wall does more than chronicle the past.
It is about people. That's what I think is so dramatic about the wall. It has the names of every one of those over 58,000 casualties in the Vietnam War. That's about people. It's about their families. It's about their friends and their loved ones. And memorials should be about people, because memorials should remind us of what these people did, but also should be a North Star for future leaders.
The war experiences of Secretary Hagel and his brother and squad mate Tom are chronicled in a book released this week. Retired Army Lieutenant General Dan Bolger wrote the book through the eyes of the Hagel brothers. The book explores one of America's most chaotic years, 1968. I spoke with Secretary Hagel about the book and what it means to have the story of the war told through his family's experience.
He brings all that together, I think, in a pretty good book. Whether he uses Tom and me as kind of the vehicle, but whether he would have used somebody else, I think it's a good story. Not because it's about Tom and me, but it's a good story about the country and war.
The book is available in bookstores and online. Everett Alvarez was one of America's longest-serving prisoners of war. For more than 8 years, he was subjected to interrogation and torture by the North Vietnamese. And as Christian Garzone reports, during that time, the whole world changed.
Being one of the longest-held American prisoners of war, Commander Everett Alvarez says that period confined in Vietnam was anything but wasted time and taught him some valuable lessons.
I've never thought of those years as wasted. I lost some great years. 26, I was shot down and I was 26 years old. I came out at 35. The Vietnamese used to say, these are the best years of your life, and look at you sitting here, and if you cooperate with us, maybe we can let you go home, maybe. But you got to prove it to us. Well, But looking back on it, those were probably the best years of my life that I missed out. But I think I learned so much about myself. I learned so much about others and living with others and horrible conditions. And I learned a lot about love and about loyalty and patriotism and our country that is good, and not just the richness of our country and the comforts of living here, but also our philosophy and our motivation in terms of how we help some other people. And we're not perfect.
Alvarez's time in prison did not slow him down after the Vietnam War. He went on to attend law school, served as deputy administrator for the VA, and later founded Alvarez & Associates, an IT consulting firm in the Washington, D.C. area.
I don't think captivity really defines what you're going to become. I think captivity gives you the experience that it sort of solidifies your base. It gives you a stronger foundation. Your experience gives you a stronger foundation of what it is you want to pursue in your life. I was just doing my job.
Through it all, Everett says there are no regrets.
I had an opportunity to do something that had I passed it up, I would have probably regretted that the rest of my life.
Christian Garzone, Defense News Weekly.
If you watch C-SPAN, the face of retired Admiral Barry Black is a familiar one. He serves as the chaplain of the Senate and opens sessions with a prayer in his rather distinctive voice.
I think that one of the positive things for me has been that I don't think often in terms of racial constructs. Okay. In fact, I chuckle sometimes because very often I was assigned as kind of a pioneer, the first African-American fleet chaplain, and still the only African-American fleet chaplain, the first African-American deputy chief of chaplains, first African-American one-star chaplain in the Marine Corps, first and only African-American chief of chaplains. And a lot of times I would be in a room where I might be the only African-American there or ethnic minority there. And one of the presenters or one of the leaders would say, what do African-Americans feel about this? And I'm thinking to myself, what do African-Americans think? Because we don't think in a monolithic way. And so I think the fact that my focus has been on, quite frankly, from a Christian perspective, who I am in Christ. And so I don't think in terms of racial construct. That's where my status comes from. I am a child of the transcendent. In the Our Father, which so many religious denominations pray, it is our Father. So I think that gives me a sense of kinship, and I'm just not into this huge emphasis on remember, you are an African American. Martin King once said, we are wrapped in a blanket of mutuality tied to a single garment of destiny. And so we're one. I think the emphasis on jointness in the military brings about a spirit of teamwork, but the services compete with one another. Mm-hmm. And having been chaplain of the Marine Corps as well as chief of chaplains for the Navy and assigning chaplains to the Coast Guard, I have had an opportunity of seeing the competition for funds and for priorities between the different services that a lot of chaplains would not have an opportunity to see. And so there is some of that in spite of what a lot of people may think. Moreover, we are sort of in the legislative branch and maybe somewhat in the military, like a family. We may have a little sibling rivalry and a little scrapping with one another, but when the household is threatened, we have this amazing way of coming together, and I've seen it in the legislative branch as well as the military. And then, we're no longer hyphenated Americans. We're just Americans, and that's a beautiful thing to see as well.
For more Veterans Month coverage, be sure to visit militarytimes.com. And when we come back, soldiers tackle the Army's new readiness test, and an astronaut tells us how his military experience prepared him for a mission to space. On this week's Money Minute, personal finance expert Jeanette Mack tells us why even when you see that awesome introductory offer for a credit card, you still need to read the fine print.
Credit card offers are everywhere, even online, and the offers are sometimes too good to be true. It's hard to pass up 50,000 points just to sign up for a card, so which one do you go for? Or should you? As a service member, it's important to make smart financial decisions, especially with your credit. So the first thing to understand, sign-up bonuses usually aren't free. You'll have to spend a certain amount to earn that bonus. If you don't spend that amount in 3 months, maybe pass on that one. Overspending isn't worth any amount of rewards points. But if it's within your budget, then you need to check the annual fee. If the annual fee is high and the perks are mainly for travel and you only travel once a year, you won't get the value out of that card. If you do travel a lot, it may justify the annual fee, so do the math. It can be easy to get excited about an amazing sign-up bonus. There are tons of special offers available, but with some number crunching and a little bit of soul searching, you'll have the card that's right for you with a little something extra.
Thanks, Jeanette. When we come back, soldiers tackle the Army's new readiness test, and an astronaut tells us how his military experience prepared him for a mission to space. To get more defense news coverage, be sure to visit our website at DefenseNews.com and subscribe to our Early Bird Brief, delivered to your inbox every weekday morning to get you ready to start the day. Making sure soldiers are ready for war is critical for the Army, so the service is in the process of developing a new test to assess readiness. Megan Myers went to Fort Bragg, North Carolina to get a first-hand look.
This Fort Bragg bridge is where soldiers from the 20th Engineer Brigade just finished a pilot for the Soldier Readiness Test. It's a 3-part, 7-event test that helps commanders gauge their unit's combat readiness.
When I finished, I felt like a warrior.
I was kind of upset because my legs couldn't really move towards the end.
It's like your legs hit a brick wall and it's harder to get them going again, but once you get running, it was actually not that bad.
40 combat engineers were on the field at 6 a.m. to knock out a practice test that will help the Army to decide whether to implement the SRT, which uses events that simulate combat situations.
This specific test more accurately replicates what my soldiers as combat engineers would actually do in combat.
This helps me as a leader by identifying who is strong physically and who it needs a little bit of help physically. The goal is to get everybody on the same team so that every single person in my platoon is equally reliable.
The soldiers in this company had help from a strength and conditioning coach, a nutritionist, and an Army Master Fitness trainer to prepare. And the skills can be improved in the gym.
A tire flip is very similar to a squat, but also to a press or a clean. And so by incorporating those Olympic lifts into their exercise routine, it's going to be much more applicable to their everyday MOS and also to this test.
Worst thing you can do in terms of form is completely bending over at the waist and putting in all that pressure right into the center of your lower back, which is, like I said, is going to in turn cause further injury down the line.
For now, the SRT is still in the development and testing phase, but the Army is expected to make a decision next year. Megan Myers, Military Times.
Air Force fighter pilot Colonel Jack Fisher recently returned from 5 months aboard the International Space Station. He sat down with Steve Losey of Air Force Times to talk about how his military training prepared him to go into the final frontier.
Colonel Jack Fisher has gone about as far as you can go in his career as a pilot. But he got his start like many Air Force service members, and he said the training got him ready for his time as an astronaut.
It really helps prepare you, and I think it can be a stressful. You can have stressful situations, especially emergencies or spacewalks, and we learn in the military to compartmentalize pretty well.
Colonel Fisher has flown combat missions above Iraq and Afghanistan and test piloted some of the Air Force's most advanced fighter jets. But his blast-off aboard a Soyuz spacecraft was like nothing he's ever experienced before.
The Raptor's got a good kick in the pants, but it doesn't have 1,000,000 horsepower. So it was a heck of a kick in the pants, and the thing is, the kick just kept on coming. So it was 8.5 minutes of the best acceleration in any plane I'd ever had.
During his 5 months aboard the International Space Station, Fisher helped conduct a series of experiments, including some that could eventually help troops wounded in combat.
We've seen that there's up to 20% bone and muscle loss on astronauts, and we've gotten smarter, taking calcium supplements, doing resistive exercise, that we've basically stopped that. This drug, it actually promotes bone growth. So it takes the bones and actually spurs them to grow. That can be used maybe in battlefield.
Fisher is now back on Earth, but he's eager to return to outer space, and he thinks humanity's future lies among the stars.
I think exploration's important. It's worth the risk, it's worth the sacrifice for us to grow as a species and get better. I think that space is the key to our evolution, and I think we need to continue to explore to do that.
Stephen Losey, Air Force Times.
That's all we have time for this week. But if you want to see and read more, be sure to head over to DefenseNews.com. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.